Hey people of Earth, my name is Julia and I am the owner of Old Spool Sewing Studio here in beautiful Burrell, New Jersey. Today I'm going to show you how to hand sew your very own delicious felt donut stuffy. This is a great beginner sewing project and it's a little challenging because of this inner circle here, but I'm going to walk you through it step by step so that you can make your very own. How cute is this? So let's gather our materials and get started. Let's go over the materials that you're going to need to make this project. One of the most important is you're going to have to download my donut sewing pattern. You'll find the link to download the file in the description of this video. You will also need felt to create your pattern. I love working with felt for beginner sewing projects because the edges aren't going to fray when we cut them, so it's a little bit less of a hassle. I also love to use wool and wool blend felts because they're so much better for the environment. I include in the link in the description a few different links that you can follow to get some really great quality wool and wool blend felts. Just keep in mind that plastic felt or polyester felt is never going to biodegrade, and we don't want our little donut sewing projects to be bad for the planet, right? You're going to need a pair of fabric scissors and your paper scissors. Now, don't worry if you're not crazy like me and you don't have two separate types of scissors. Just keep in mind that if you're doing a lot of sewing, it's always good to keep your fabric scissors separate. I even put labels on mine because when you use your fabric scissors to cut things like paper, it's gonna dull them quicker. You're also gonna need a writing utensil. Wait a minute, how did this get in here? We don't need lipstick to do a project. Anyway, you're gonna need a writing utensil if you like to trace your patterns onto your felt. I love to just pin my patterns onto my felt. So if you like to just pin and cut, you're gonna need a dish of pins, sewing pins. These are quilting pins. They have balls on the end and they're so much easier to use for beginners because they're nice and long, if you can see how long they are. So avoid things like dressmaker pins because they come in such shorter lengths. You're gonna need a needle, which here's my needle taped on my pattern right up here. A note on needles, I love to use number 5 embroidery needles for projects like this because they're longer and the eye is a little bit bigger, but not quite too big that it's gonna make massive holes in our project. Also, you're gonna need either thread or what I love to use for all my hand sewing projects is embroidery floss. And especially fun for this project, especially for the sprinkles, is if you get variegated embroidery floss, which can you see how it changes colors? This will make some really fun sprinkles. Also, I always say that we like to be good for the environment. This is corn-based fiber fill, so it's actually called Nature Fill, and I link that in my description as well for anybody who wants to avoid more plasticky stuff. And you really don't need a lot for this project. A good handful is really it. All right, let's get to it. First things first, if you haven't already, you're going to want to grab your paper scissors and cut out your donut sewing patterns. Keep in mind that this is an empty space so that we get the hole in our donut, so you're going to want to cut in here as well. The best way to cut the empty space in the middle of our pattern is to gently fold it right in the center and take your scissors, just the tip, and do a little snip right into that space. Now you've created a hole where you can slip the scissors in and follow it all the way around. And if you've noticed, a big tip when cutting circles and curved lines is to gently move both your scissors and your hands as you cut those curved lines. All right, there's our donut. Now it's time to cut our frosting. Now that you have your pattern pieces ready, you're going to want to grab whatever color you've chosen for your frosting, and you're going to need 2 pieces, just like it says on my pattern, for your donut main cake part. So what I usually love to do is, if I can, I will pin and cut 2 pieces at a time. So I'm going to lay my 2 layers of felt on top of one another, and I'm going to center my donut pattern right in the middle there. I'm going to grab my pins and I'm going to put a few pins to help hold down my sewing pattern. Now, keep in mind when you pin, you want to go in and come back out so that you can see both ends of the pin, and you're going to want to use plenty of pins in order to hold your pattern piece down. This is not the time to cut corners, also because we're not actually cutting corners, we're cutting circles. Now, if you don't have pins, safety pins work really well. You can stick a few safety pins in here. Also, if you don't have pins and you don't really want to pin and cut, you can absolutely hold your hand down, grab whatever writing utensil you like, and just trace along the outside of your pattern piece. Sharpies are great for this because they're very bold and you can see the line, but I also love using Pilot brand friction pens. If you can see this, it's friction pens, blah, blah, blah. That word is very tricky for me. Friction pens will go away when you iron them, which do not iron your felt if it is polyester felt because it will melt, but you can absolutely put a cool-ish, warm-ish iron on wool or wool blend felt and it will not melt. When in doubt, you can always put another piece of fabric over top and put the iron on top of that to get rid of all your lines. But I'm just gonna go ahead, pin and cut my pattern piece, and then I'm gonna do the same with my frosting. Now, for this part, I'm going to quickly demonstrate how you can trace and cut because I actually don't really like to cut the hole out using the pattern piece. I like to trace and cut the hole. So let's just trace so I have some sort of circle, and then I'm going to take my pins out and I'm going to flip the whole thing over and put my donut back on, stick a pin in it to hold, or you can even just hold it down with your hand and gently draw a circle. And we're gonna be trimming off this marker line, so don't worry if you accidentally do some stuff in there. We're gonna be cutting that out. So again, like before, you're gonna gently fold, make sure you're folding right in the middle. It's kind of, you can see where I did that dot, that's where I'm gonna try and fold my pattern piece, or my felt piece, and I'm just gonna use the tip of my scissors. Don't do this. What if your hand slips? You'll cut your donut in half. A little snip, and then I'm gonna work to cut out my circle. Okay, that's it. That's all the pieces that you have to cut to make your little donut. Let's get to sewing on some sprinkles. So let's get to sewing our first part. We're going to be sewing our donut frosting onto one of the cake pieces, and in doing so, we're also going to create our sprinkle pattern on top of the donut. Now, for this part, I highly recommend you get good at pinning. Pins are an essential tool when it comes to sewing, and I've used them my whole sewing practice. But if pins intimidate you and you're having a hard time, a good old standby is an Elmer's glue stick. Because they're water soluble, which means that they're going to disappear when they get washed, means that they're not going to gum up our needle, and they're going to be a great addition to your sewing kit. So for fun, let's use the Elmer glue stick, and I'm going to take a little bit and put some on the wrong side. And you really don't need a lot. If you can see, I'm not putting that much on. And I'm gonna grab one of my cake pieces and I'm gonna put my frosting glue side down right on top of one of my cake pieces. Oh, it already looks like a donut! So I usually like to double check here that I didn't do too bad of a job cutting out the two circles, and I'm probably gonna go back and trim out that extra pink so it makes it easier for me to sew the donut pieces together. Now, you're gonna grab whatever floss or thread you've chosen to use. These are some colors that I would love to sew with hot pink. I love mix and matching my colors, but I'm gonna use what I already have opened in my sewing kit. Let's start with some purple. Now you're gonna wanna measure out a piece that is about as long as your arm. So I usually hold it in my fingertips and then I stretch my arm out so I get a nice long piece. Now, embroidery floss is what we call stranded. So if you're using embroidery floss, you're going to want to pay attention. There are 6 strands in this embroidery floss, which that means that there are 6 separate pieces of thread that we can use. What we're going to do is very carefully and very gently either separate out 2 or 3 and gently pull them apart. Now, if you can see, as I pull, the strands are plied together. And what plied means is that they are lightly twisted together to hold them as one piece of yarn. So you have to go really slow as you do this, how much it's spinning, or else you get a knot. So I just kind of gently pull my arms apart. Oh, no, I'm gonna get a knot. Ah, see, I got a knot. And if you get a knot like me, don't panic. If it's at the end, just cut it off. Snip. And now I got a nice long piece of embroidery floss so I can sew some sprinkles on. You're gonna grab your needle and you're gonna thread your needle, and this is another reason that we only wanna use 2 or 3 strands, because it is a pain in the patootie to get it through that little eye. I also highly recommend grabbing a needle threader. I love these needle threaders because they're metal, they're not gonna break. And what you do is you stick the hook through, you grab your yarn or your embroidery floss, and you pull it through. Come on, baby. Come on, baby. Oop, look, I only got 2 strands when I got it through. That's fine, just gonna get rid of that one. All right, and I like to knot. If you can see, I didn't pull the strand all the way down to meet my other strand. I have one long one and one short one. So I'm gonna tie a knot in the long strand. And if you need help, always ask an adult, but you want a little bit of a chunky knot, if you can see that. And I'm gonna start from the back side of my donut, and I'm gonna make sure that I come up on the frosting. So here we go, we're gonna start in the back side. Why the back side? Because wherever I stick my needle, that's where the knot's gonna be. So if I stick my needle in up here, there's gonna be a knot on the good side, and I don't want that. When you pull the needle through, if you threaded it the same way I did, you're gonna wanna grab the bottom of the needle, kind of put your fingers around the eye and the thread, and that's how you'll pull your thread through. I'm gonna pull until your knot is nice and snug against the back. And we're gonna do a variation on a running stitch here so that we can create our sprinkles. So wherever you came out, you're gonna go a short distance away and you're gonna sink the needle back in. Pull tight, and look, there's a sprinkle. Now, try your best not to jump from here to over here. You're gonna use up a whole lot of thread in the process. What you're gonna wanna do is from the back, because that's where our thread is right now, we're gonna wanna move over just a tiny bit, come up from the back side, pull tight, and make another sprinkle. Let's put it in a different direction. So if you see, you're drawing with the thread and you're already sewing. So I'm just gonna work my way around until I have an adequate amount of sprinkles. Now, if at any time you have gone to the back side, which you can see that's where my thread is, but you accidentally go through the front, what's gonna happen is your thread's gonna wrap around your donut. And that is not what we're going for. And this is also why I thread my needle this way, so that I can easily take the needle out of the thread, or the thread out of the needle rather, and then I'll use my needle to pull that last stitch out. And see how I just undid what I did? Unfortunately, now I gotta go rethread my needle again, and that proved very difficult for me at first, but it is much better than an unsightly mistake like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish sewing all my sprinkles, and then I'll meet you back here and we'll start to sew it together. So here I am after sewing all of my sprinkles on. I kind of like not too many sprinkles. I don't want it to be too crowded, but you do you. If you want to do lots of colors, please do lots of colors. I'm gonna flip it over and make sure that my thread is finished on the back, and we're gonna tie a knot. Now, watch how I do this. It is very easy once you practice it a few times. I'm gonna go in and out very close to where I finished. This was my last stitch where I came out. And I'm gonna stick the needle halfway through my project. Then, holding the needle up and out of the way, see how I kind of fold my fabric out of the way? I'm gonna take the working thread that's coming out of my project, so this yarn right here, and I'm gonna wrap it 1, 2, maybe 3 times around the needle. So you see how I wrapped it? All the wraps down there. And then I'm gonna pull my needle the rest of the way out, and that forms a happy little knot nice and close to my fabric. And then I can cut off my thread. And if you're gonna do another color, now's the time to do it. but I love just pink and purple, so we're gonna leave it just like that. Now, like I said before, I'm gonna trim off this little bit of extra pink, and I'm gonna be super careful not to cut my donut. And this is also why, if you noticed, I kept my sprinkles kind of further away, except for that one, kind of further away from the circle. All right, that's good enough. Now, let's sew our donut together. We're gonna take the two cake pieces and we're gonna lay them together so that the holes are right on top of one another. See that? Now, if you're trying to practice with your pins, grab a pin and let's put a pin or two in our project. I'm making sure that I go through all my layers. See how you can see my pin on the back? 1 and 2. Oh, let's make sure it comes back out like this. Now, if your frosting is starting to come up, let's wait till the end and then we'll grab our glue stick again, or you can even use regular gel glue or the goopy glue and you can put a dab around it, but let's wait until the very end to fix our frosting on. Now, guess what we're gonna do? We're gonna do a joining hand sewing stitch in the circle first. So we're gonna start with the most complicated one. Let's grab whatever color you wanna use. I think I'm gonna switch to green for fun, just cause I've got it. And just like before, we're gonna get a nice long piece, as long as our arm. We're gonna split it in half and thread our needle. Okay, so you have your donut pieces pinned together, your frosting sewn on through your sprinkle stitches, and you've got your needle threaded with whatever color you want to stitch the center circle closed with. Now remember, I only tied a knot on one end and I've got a little bit extra up here, and that other piece, when I separated my embroidery floss, I'm holding on to that because there is a good chance I'm going to need that. We're not going to make it all the way through either the middle or all the way around the outside with only one piece of thread. All right, let's get to it. So first, I'm gonna show you how to do a whip stitch. A whip stitch is a very simple, straightforward hand sewing stitch, and it's super helpful to know. You can use it to join all of your felt stuffies and to fix your clothes or sew things together if you're doing your own sewing projects. What we're gonna do is, remember how before I started from the inside, the back side when we sewed on our frosting? This time we're gonna start from the inside. So I'm gonna make sure I'm looking inside and I've kind of separated my two layers, and I'm gonna stick the needle only through the back layer from front to back. And then I'm gonna grab that needle and I'm gonna fold my donut. Can you see how I'm folding my donut a little bit so that where I'm sewing is up on the top? And I'm gonna grab my needle and pull tight. When you do this, see, I have a big unsightly knot, so I'm just gonna tuck him to the inside. Now, that fold that I'm doing with my hands, if you can see, is really important, is what's gonna make this whole process go so much smoother. So you're gonna wanna fold, and if your pins are in the way, you can reposition them, or you can use safety pins here. I'm just always mindful, and you know what? It really doesn't hurt if you poke yourself with a pin. And we are going to do a stitch from front to back through all the layers. So if you can see, right where I came out, right next to it, I'm going through all my layers, and I'm gonna grab the needle from the inside of the circle. Don't put your hand around back and pull or you're gonna get twisted. Grab your needle from the front of the hole and pull tight by pulling towards you. And there's one stitch. And again, with it folded, see how it's like a little angle? You're gonna poke through all your layers, make sure you're going through all the layers or you're gonna get a hole. And I reach for the needle into the hole, and pull tight. Every single stitch you're gonna wanna pull tight. And see, what a whip stitch does is it gives you these little bars of stitches. So also while you whip stitch, if you notice, I'm sticking pretty close to the edge of my felt pieces. You don't really wanna go all the way down here because the further down you go, the more of the thread you're gonna see, okay? So let's work every time grabbing from the center, all the way around our middle layers and sew our donut pieces together. Ooh. So here I am, I've sewn all the way around the center, making sure to catch both layers, and see how my stitches are pretty close to the edge. Also, a thing you're gonna learn real quick in hand sewing is that your stitches have to be close together. Can you guys see? Like, that's my finger, and you can see how close all my stitches are. If your stitches are too far apart, you're gonna get holes in your sewing project, and that is so not gonna work, especially when we go to fluff it. So I finished up. My needle is actually towards the back, so I'm gonna put my needle towards the back here. And I'm gonna do the same thing we did earlier to tie a knot. I'm gonna catch a little bit of fabric, wrap the thread around my needle, and pull tight. And there's my knot. And if you really hate looking at the knot, you can stick your needle inside the layers and then come out like an inch away. So if you look, I didn't go through the front, but I stuck it between the layers, came out the back, and I'm gonna pull tight. Oop, got a little thread caught. Come here, you. And I'm gonna cut the thread right there. At this point, if you haven't already, you can take out your pins because your stuffy is being held together by those whip stitches. Awesome! So now let's thread up a needle again with a nice long piece of thread. Hey, maybe that piece that we saved from before. And we're gonna learn how to do a blanket stitch around the outside. If you only wanna do a whip stitch, you can absolutely just do a whip stitch, but let's get a little bit more challenging and do a blanket stitch because I love a blanket stitch for how it gives a little border of thread on my project. Another reason I like to thread my needles in this manner, where I have a knot on one end and then it folded in half only part of the way, is because as you go along, you can actually make your thread longer. So right now, this is a really reasonable length of thread. But if I want more, all I have to do is see how I can pull the needle and get my piece to be longer. So this helps a lot if you have a really long piece of thread and you need to make it more manageable. Now, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna show you how to do a blanket stitch, which is a little bit more complicated of a hand sewing technique, but it gives a really cute finished product when you use it on a project like this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start from the inside and I'm actually gonna come out through the front layer of my project. I've got a knot in one end, so when I pull tight, that knot's gonna end up on the inside. And then what I'm gonna do is moving over a little bit of a way, and if you have a ruler handy, that's about 1/4 of an inch and no more than that. I'm gonna stick my needle front to back just like with a whip stitch, but the difference is I'm gonna hold the thread in my left hand and make sure that I put the thread behind the needle. Can you see how the working thread is behind my needle? And then I'm gonna pull tight. And when you do that, what you're gonna get is a little ridge starting to form on the top of our project. So again, I've got my project in my left hand, I've got the thread in my left hand, see this? Needle, go over about 1/4 of an inch, front to back, put the thread behind my needle, and pull tight. And if you pull in a direction, oops, I got caught. If you pull away from your project straight out like this, not towards you, not away from you, you'll start to get, see that little ridge that's created? How fun is that? So this is a blanket stitch. One more time, we're gonna hold the thread in our left hand. I'm gonna poke my needle front to back, thread behind my needle, and pull tight. And you're gonna do this all the way around your donut until you get about a hand's length of thread left. I forgot to mention that before, but you absolutely want to, because we're doing such a long distance here, you're gonna have to rethread your needle. So when you have about a hand's length left, if you see when the thread's like that long, that's when we're gonna tie a knot. So I'm gonna stitch until I get to a point where I have to tie a knot, and then I'll show you how we start again with a new strand, all right? Here we are, we've stitched all the way around the outside with a little opening so that we can put some stuffing in here. Now, if you've opted to not stuff your donut, you can go ahead and just finish sewing that closed, and you have a cute little donut that you can hang on the wall, or maybe put a magnet on the back and turn it into a fridge magnet. But we're gonna make a little stuffy here today. So I actually left my needle threaded, and if you see, I actually ran out of the dark green color about here, so I just switched to a different green. Oh well. So I'm leaving my needle threaded because it's just easier, and I have enough thread that'll be able to close up the hole when I'm done. You're gonna grab your fluff, and you're gonna wanna break it up into smaller pieces. And a really handy tool that I didn't mention earlier, but I'm telling you, everybody's got one, is a chopstick. This is fantastic for helping you stuff into small spaces, and it seems like everybody's got a chopstick hanging out in their utensil or junk drawer. If you don't have a chopstick, you can use your fingers or grab a pen or something else long and skinny. Leave the cap on, or a pencil. Just be very careful. The nice thing about a chopstick is it doesn't have a sharp point. A pen and a pencil do, so maybe a blunt pencil will work great here. So you're going to want to break it up into smaller pieces, and watching the needle on there, you're going to stuff little bit by little bit into your donut. You don't want to overstuff your donut because it can look really lumpy really quickly. And you're going to get it in there, and then I'm going to use the chopstick, kind of fluff it and break it up and get it around the corner there. You can see I got my fluff all the way over to there. So go ahead and fluff up your donut if you choose to, or finish up sewing. And we're nearly there, guys. Now, if you notice, if you didn't put quite enough stitches or glue down your whole frosting piece before, you're going to have some pieces that start to come up. Don't worry about that right now. We're going to be able to fix that at the very end with a little bit of glue. So let's just finish stuffing. And you're not going to want to stuff so much that there's stuffing blowing out of that hole there. You're going to want to make sure it's all the way in. Oh, you know, I got a little divot there that I need to get my chopstick. There we go, that's better. And you can see I have enough fluff in there so it looks dimensional and 3D, but not so much that the stuffing is blowing out any of the little holes over here. Also, if you have a blowout, something that some stuffing's popping out, your stitches might have gotten too far apart and you're gonna have to go back and fix them. So now I'm just gonna use my hands to hold this closed and stitch the last few stitches to finish my donut. If you want to make your donut something that you can hang or turn into a keychain like my OG sample here, you're going to want to grab a piece of ribbon, cut it about 5 inches long, it's about as long as your hand, fold it in half and put some stitches in it as you close over the hole. But I'm just going to leave this stuffy, just a donut, just a simple donut. Is anybody else like super hungry right now? I mean, for real, we just spent such a great time making donuts that all I really want is a donut now. I wonder if the donut shop is open. Anyway, you are finished. I am so proud of you. You rose to the occasion to stitch a tricky little circle part in the middle of this donut. You made some fantastic running stitches that look like sprinkles, and if you took the extra step and made a blanket stitch, you are the bee's knees. I hope that you enjoyed sewing up this project. As always, my name is Julia from Old Spool Sewing Studio here in Brielle, New Jersey. I hope that you can follow me on Instagram, subscribe to my page here, like this video. It means the world to me if you enjoy sewing and like to share it with me. If you have any questions, you know where to reach me. All of my information is in the description below, and you can always leave a comment here on the video. I hope that everybody has a fantastic day, and as always, happy stitching!